As we're nearing down to this time before the Antichrist rises, there are some things that God is showing me in Scripture, and I want to show them to you. The first is in Daniel 11, and we're going to start in verse 25. I want to remind you that this, when the chapter is talking about the king of the north and the king of the south, this is one kingdom. This is the kingdom of the Antichrist. But that kingdom is a divided kingdom. And within that kingdom, there's one who has dominant power at a given time. And that's the king of the north. And so what you're seeing is the king of the north starting out as Babylon the Great, the harlot Catholic Church. And then the king of the south are the prostitutes that bore out of her. And then those prostitutes, along with the false prophet, end up succeeding Babylon the Great in power, in dominant power. It's not as though she doesn't have power, but now she's taking the lower seat. And then you see the image of the Antichrist rise to power, so that the false prophet and the prostitutes take the lower seat. And then you see that a false god is helping that image of the Antichrist to rise to power and to, as it says in verse 39, he will attack the mightiest fortresses. So the image of the Antichrist will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. And that foreign god is the foreign god that they've been prostituting themselves to. The image of the Antichrist, counterfeit Israel, has been prostituting themselves to the foreign god that exists in Babylon the Great, the harlot Catholic Church. So I've been pointing out to you some of the things that are happening in real time so that you can understand what is unfolding. We're living in very tumultuous and chaotic and erratic times. The BFF of this false prophet in a second can just flip. And it's not really so much the result of, what we just saw in the last few days between Elon and Trump. I will guarantee you that it is the lack of loyalty and the exploitation of the king representing this false prophet. And you can see that not just in that relationship. What I believe happened, and I knew this from the beginning, is Elon has a lot of trauma with his own father. And you could see a very weird trauma playing out. And I believe that Trump exploited that. He knew what he was doing. He knew that he could manipulate Elon. And that's exactly what he was doing. He was using Elon's unresolved suffering to manipulate him and to exploit him. And so that's what you're seeing right now in the response. The response from Elon is so erratic and intense and disproportionate and is not an adult response. This is the response of someone who has unresolved trauma and has been deeply betrayed and exploited. And this is the reaction that you're seeing. So it's actually very sad. But God is using it to fulfill something. And I'm going to show you. So verse 39, he will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god and will greatly acknowledge those who acknowledge him. The harlot Catholic Church, as I told you before, J.D. Vance went and spoke with the Pope, this new American Pope who has agreed to help to negotiate between Ukraine and Russia. And there has always also been talk, which is the ultimate thing that we should be focused on. There's also been talk about him negotiating between, with Israel and these Arab nations, involving himself in that. And so, why is there so much emphasis on the Pope getting involved? This is sort of a change in history. Why suddenly at this point is this even on the table? The Pope didn't get involved in other situations, did they? In fact, during the Holocaust, they stayed pretty hands-off. But suddenly, it's understood that this would be a good thing for the Pope to get involved. And he will. And he will aid the image of the Antichrist in attacking. And right now the narrative is that all those who do not worship the image of the Antichrist, as it is written in Revelation 13, right now the narrative is that they are terrorists. What will the narrative be when there's more of a religious explanation to it? Just as in the Spanish Inquisition, the narrative was that they were heretics for not worshiping the Antichrist. And what is the narrative if you speak against the false prophet, for example, from within the false prophet? Well, I shared with you a recent interview of Miles Taylor, who worked within the first Trump administration and came out and spoke criticizing the president, which is allowed, by the way, under the Constitution. You're allowed to criticize the president, and is being accused of treason, and the punishment for treason is death in the United States. And there is a mafia president here who would not hesitate to do these things. He's already doing things that are very similar, outsourcing punitive action to other countries so that he's not held responsible under the law until the law is changed and he can do whatever he wants. Well, now, if someone like me claims that the United States is the false prophet, what do you think that's called? What do you think I'll be held accountable for in 4 months? It's not as though these things are so far-fetched. I'm showing you in Scripture where they're at, and I'm showing you in real time how they're unfolding. The language of Scripture might seem peculiar, but I'm showing you where this is unfolding, how this is unfolding. Now, in the last month or so, we've had the Trump and Netanyahu falling out. In the last few days to a week, we've had at least one person that we can see turning on him in a major way, although there have, of course, been more, all the way back to the first Trump administration. And then we also have Miles Taylor coming out and talking more about the punitive action, the mafia action that's being taken by this administration, and doing interviews talking about this, saying that he's not able to get a job because they are blacklisting him. His wife, who was a stay-at-home mom, now has to go to work because he can't get a job for speaking out against the president, which was a constitutional right. Now, I want to point something out. Revelation 13 says that the false prophet is the one who's going to cause all who refuse to worship the image of the beast not to be able to buy or sell. It's the false prophet who's going to do that. It's the image of the Antichrist who is going to cause all who will not worship it to be killed. And both of them are doing that right now. They may not be doing it with God's people yet, but they are doing it with other people. The false prophet is blacklisting those who will not agree with its agenda, will not drink its Kool-Aid, will not worship what it worships. The image of the Antichrist is killing all those who refuse to worship it. Anyone who speaks against it, anyone who exposes it. Let's read it in Revelation 13. The second beast is the false prophet. This is Revelation 13, verse 15. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast. So, false prophet gives breath, power, life to the image of the first beast, which is counterfeit Israel, so that the image could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. So that the image could speak and cause all who refuse to worship the image to be killed. So the image is responsible for people being killed. It also forced all people, the false prophet, also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Okay, I need to correct something. If this is indeed talking about the false prophet here in verse 16, I have been thinking that it was actually the image of the beast who forces all to receive the mark. So it will continue to be the false prophet who is perpetuating this ideology. Even though, by the way, the false prophet is going to fall in power to the image of the Antichrist. That does not mean that the false prophet will not have power. It means that the image of the Antichrist will supersede, will succeed the United States in power. Still a divided kingdom, but they'll come together for certain things, and you'll see that in Daniel 11. So what does this mean? Is the United States causing people to receive a physical mark? No. Nothing physical is what's going to defile you. It's what comes from your heart. So it's the false prophet that is perpetuating this ideology that you must believe, that you must go along with this agenda, and must come out of your right hand, and it must come out of your forehead, your thoughts and beliefs, your right hand being your deeds, and your mouth, what you speak. If anything else is coming out of your mouth, your deeds, your thoughts, and your beliefs, as you can see right now, anything else comes out of your mouth, free speech is no longer a right. Anything else is coming out of your mouth, you are at risk of being a terrorist. You are at risk of being accused of treason. You will be killed. Let's take a look now at these rifts. Now what we're seeing in verse 21 is a transfer of power. But just because you don't see yet the extent of the power that's been given to counterfeit Israel, the image of the Antichrist, though you should be able to see this through things like, the false prophet elections and the influence of AIPAC, etc. But that image of the Antichrist is going to continue to rise in power as it has. It has been. So verse 21, actually let's just start at verse 20. His successor will send out a tax collector. So the harlot Catholic Church, Babylon the Great, the successor will send out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor. That's your counterfeit tithing, by the way. Tithing was always a part of sacrifice. It was fulfilled through sacrifice. In a few years, however, he will be destroyed, yet not in anger or in battle. By the way, it's not destroyed by the image of the Antichrist, but it is persecuted by it, and I will show you in Revelation 9. The irony in that is that the Antichrist, these prostitutes, Christian Zionism, is worshiping it. And the very thing that they worship is going to turn on it. Is that not God's pattern? Does he not hand you over to Satan, the very thing that you worship when you choose him? I will show you in Revelation 9, verse 21. He will be succeeded by a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. So this successor, by the way, who sends out a tax collector to maintain the royal splendor, these are the prostitutes that bore out of Babylon the Great. It appears that by the next statement, in a few years, however, he will be destroyed, yet not in anger or in battle, that Babylon the Great is actually going to rise in power and importance. You're going to see the Catholic Church rise again in power and importance, so that the prostitutes will fade back and forget why it is that they separated from Babylon the Great to begin with. They'll just fall under her. Seems to be a sort of full circle thing that God is doing. And you see that J.D. Vance and, this administration are beginning to defer. They're beginning to defer to the Pope and the authority of that original harlot. For many years, the United States was anti-Catholic. But all of a sudden, they're all about Catholicism. And all of a sudden, the Pope is American. And the fact that he's American is being used in order to form this alliance, and we understand your ways, you understand ours, you see? He will be succeeded by a contemptible person. So we're talking about the prostitutes and the false prophet. That's what's been in power, right? Here in the United States, in particular, the prostitutes and the false prophet. But there's now a transfer of power that's happening and has been happening over time. He, the false prophet, and the prostitutes will be succeeded by a contemptible person who's not been given the honor of royalty. Why is it written that way? Because this land of Israel is not a legit kingdom. It is a counterfeit kingdom. All of the kingdoms that have been set up from Babylon to Medo-Persia, Greece, pagan Rome, papal Rome, atheistic communism, the United States, all of those kingdoms were set up by God. This kingdom was fabricated by man. God is not looking at counterfeit Israel and saying, oh yeah, that's my people. Those are my chosen people. This is a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. He is the king or prime minister of a kingdom that is not, that does not exist, that has not been given the honor of royalty. He will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure, and he will seize it through intrigue. So he has indeed invaded the kingdom of the false prophet and seized it through intrigue. And the invasion is not necessarily a physical invasion or an invasion of war. It is an invasion in which he has seized it through intrigue. He has manipulated it. And the irony in this is that the false prophet created that. The false prophet created the very narrative by which it seized it through intrigue. The narrative that these are the chosen people and that we need to worship them and that they are essentially a false Messiah. This administration is being pastored by people who teach them that this is not just a matter of our creator, but it's a matter of a chosen people. Faith in a creator, but faith in a chosen people. What do you mean faith in a chosen people? We're not saved through faith in human beings. We're saved through faith in a Messiah. That is the Antichrist narrative. Faith in a chosen people, so that you are worshiping and you are placing your hope. Faith is hope in what is not seen. So you're placing your faith, your hope, your belief in a chosen people, and you don't even have the sense, if this is what you believe, you don't even have the sense to recognize that that so-called chosen people don't live according to God's law. They live according to themselves, to their own glory, and they defend sodomy, rape, theft of land, and murder to their own ends. Our hope is in something that is before us. We're suffering here right now in order to inherit that hope. These are a people who want that now. And so they're willing to exploit a false narrative. Jewish Zionists are willing to exploit a false narrative in order to get their rewards now because they don't believe in God. They can't possibly believe in God if they don't obey what he's commanded. So he will be succeeded by a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. He will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure, and he will seize it through intrigue. Then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and a prince of the covenant will be destroyed. Now, let me explain the army. Because in Revelation 17, we're told that the 10 Germanic tribes, the 10 kings, or 10 horns, which are 10 kings or kingdoms, these are the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe. They're going to receive power for an hour, along with the beast, along with the false prophet in this case, specifically within the beast. And the way that they have received that power is through NATO. That alliance gave them power. That covenant gave them power. And the prince of the covenant is the false prophet. So they joined with the Antichrist, which is a system that includes the false prophet, false Christianity, Babylon the Great, which started false Christianity and false Judaism, and the image of the Antichrist. And now it also includes the 10 Germanic tribes, because when you join with the Antichrist, you become the Antichrist. And so the prince of the covenant is this prince within the Antichrist of the false prophet that has joined with these kingdoms, the 10 Germanic tribes that became Western Europe, who for 1 hour will receive power and authority along with the beast. They have one purpose, and their purpose is to hand over their power and authority to the beast. So these other things that you've been seeing, the rifts that are being created, because this king here in the false prophet He's a very disturbed person, extremely disturbed. He does not have relationships. He has interactions. And he's your BFF so long as those interactions are going the way that he wants. And when they don't, there's no loyalty. You can see that. And he's a blatant liar. And he exploits people. There is nothing authentic or genuine about this person. And there are rifts happening right and left. No one trusts him. And you can see that that rift has begun to happen with Europe. Europe no longer trusts the United States. And this army, this covenant, this alliance is dismantling. And that alliance just so happens to include an army. And he has threatened many times to withdraw. And without the United States, there is no NATO. But I want you to understand something, that the United States and Western Europe have been used for the purposes for which God set them apart. Western Europe has continually given power and authority, testified to the image of the Antichrist, all the way back to the Balfour Declaration, and they continue to do it today. The false prophet has fulfilled their two purposes in Revelation 13. One, to give breath to the image of the Antichrist, and two, to testify to the Antichrist. Once your purpose has been fulfilled, you're no longer needed. So you should understand why these rifts are happening, why the dismantling is happening at this point in history. And then if you can see that, then you should understand what's going on at this point in history, and that everything that I've told you is true. Then an overwhelming army will be swept away before him. Both it and a prince of the covenant will be destroyed. After coming to an agreement with him, the image of the Antichrist, he will act deceitfully, and with only a few people he will rise to power. Well, we already know from later on in the chapter, when it talks about the false god or foreign god that is helping him, we know that Babylon the Great is going to help him. That's one of the things that's going to help it rise to power. I don't believe for 1 second that Babylon the Great is going to jive with Trump. There may be negotiations happening. There may be a facilitation, but Babylon the Great is not going to work directly with Trump. There's too much ego in the false prophet. He's not going to submit. And he's not going to want anyone else to take credit for the deal. Can you see that? At the very least, you should be able to see that. He doesn't even allow the nations that are involved in the deal to be part of the deal because he wants the credit. Okay, so that's one of the quote-unquote people who are going to help it rise to power. Another one that I've been talking with you about is India. It actually seems like India will become the new BFF of Israel. They appear to be of one mind. And India prostitutes itself to Israel, wants to be just like Israel, has the same ideology of Israel, anti-Muslim, nationalists, and they continue to grow closer and closer. Okay, so there's been a rift, there's a lack of trust, but these two kings, the false prophet and the image of the Antichrist, counterfeit Israel, are going to come together at some point. They're going to come together. You know that. You should already know that. After coming to an agreement with him, the image of the Antichrist, he will act deceitfully, and with only a few people will rise to power. What does Netanyahu always say? What did he say when Trump declared Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel? Oh, the United States, our very good friend. Same spirit is the same spirit. And these two are destined for a rift. They both have the same mentality. They are both deceitful. They are both self-seeking. When they talk about friend, they don't know anything about friendship or relationship. They are for themselves. And they are exploiting one another. They're liars. When the richest provinces feel secure, he will invade them and will achieve what neither his fathers nor his forefathers did. He will distribute plunder, loot, and wealth among his followers. He will plot the overthrow of fortresses, but only for a time. Who's he receiving help from? He's receiving help from Babylon the Great. That religious ideology, that counterfeit religion, is going to facilitate this. Okay, so then we see that there's going to be tension between the king of the north and the king of the south. With a large army, he will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south. The king of the south will wage war with a large and very powerful army. Here's where I want to tell you We talked about the army that's going to be swept away. And now we're talking about a large army in which he's going to stir up his strength. I'm sorry, the king of the south will wage war with a large and powerful army, but will not able to stand because of the plots devised against him. You can't look at this as something that is necessarily happening like sequentially, where the army is going to be swept away and then the king of the south will wage war with a large and powerful army. What the word is talking about is what's going to be happening during this time. Here is where that large army is being swept away. That large army is being swept away because of the plots devised against him. Have plots been devised against him? If you look at the kingdom of the false prophet of the United States, is this a divided kingdom, guys? Because it sure looks like it. There is a lot of chaos and dissension and discord that is being stirred up by this king. This is not a kingdom that is on board, that is of one mind. And this is what that spirit, the personality of that spirit does, of the spirit of the devil does. It creates discord. It doesn't have a harmonious kingdom that is brought together by its spirit, but as God does. God brings us together by his Holy Spirit. This is different. This is a kingdom. This is a spirit who destroys his own people, destroys his own kingdom. When you study personality disorders in psychology, which I'm not recommending, but I'm just telling you, this is the spirit of the devil. When you study personality disorders, particularly narcissism or borderline personality disorder, which is really just the narcissism that is used for women, and fundamentally is the spirit of the devil. This is exactly what they do, and it's a phenomenon or a process that psychology refers to as splitting. And what they do is they create factions with the people who are under them in order for them to remain in power. Because as long as everyone's fighting, they're not going to come after you. But the joke's on them, because eventually they do come after them. But they do it, and it's not even like necessarily a conscious thing that they're doing. Sometimes I think it's semi-conscious. These people are evil. Even with narcissists do this, or those being identified as narcissists, which fundamentally, character of the devil, personality of the devil, spirit of the devil, your character, your personality comes from the spirit that occupies you. So when you look, when people are studying narcissism, they see that these people will even create factions with like their new girlfriends. And those new girlfriends will get so wrapped up in the drama and the discord and the evil and the narrative that they'll go and start stalking the other girlfriends. This is why I tell you, if you just identify the spirit in a person, you'll dust your feet from it real quickly, and you'll never have to go down that path. The word says test the spirit in a person to see if they're from God. If you don't test the spirit, you're going to go through it with that spirit. But this is what that personality of that spirit is doing through this king. And then when those people turn on them, what do? You've seen it. What does this one do? Dismisses them as crazy. Tells some stupid narrative. Oh, it must be Trump derangement syndrome because Elon Musk is so upset that he's not in the White House anymore. What does he care about being in the White House? Oh, he's not associated with me anymore, so that's why he's upset? Come on. Oh, everybody's so happy when they're here, and then when they leave, I don't know what happens. They just turn into... That's just the stupidest explanation. No, what he was doing and what you saw were fights within his cabinet with Elon Musk, but also between other people. You saw things dismantling. It's a joke. It's a show. And then one person gets ousted and totally dismissed as being crazy. And the whole thing is for the stimulation and the inflation of that person's ego, of their sense of self-importance. That's what you're seeing in this spirit. And it says in verse 26 that those who eat from the king's provisions will try to destroy him. His army will be swept away and many will fall in battle. That wouldn't happen if this person is loyal. That wouldn't happen if they had the Spirit of God, because the Spirit of God would bring them into unity. That wouldn't happen if this was the kingdom of God. because the Spirit of God would bring them to unity. What you're seeing right now is a divided kingdom that is being operated by a different spirit. And the irony is that they do all of these things that they do, all of the evil that they conduct, they claim to be in the name of Christianity. So again, make a deal, make a deal, make a deal. Verse 27. The two kings with their hearts bent on evil will sit at the same table and lie to each other, but to no avail, because the end will still come at the appointed time. The king of the north will return to his own country with great wealth, but his heart will be set against the Holy Covenant. He will take action against it and then return to his own country. At the appointed time, he will invade the south again, but this time the outcome will be different from what it was before. Now listen to what is being said. Ships of the western coastlands will appoint him. When the Bible is talking about ships or merchants on the sea are peoples, multitudes, languages, and nations. And in Revelation 17, we're told that Babylon the Great is essentially sits by many waters. And then you're told later that the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, languages, and nations. And you're told later in Scripture that the ships and the merchants who got rich from her excessive luxuries are wailing and crying because Babylon has fallen. Not because they love her, but because they know they're next. And because they're no longer going to get rich from that. So when you see that ships of the western coastlands will oppose him and he will lose heart, this isn't about trade. It's not about the trade of physical goods necessarily. But that the trade of physical goods is representing those who do business with her, those who get rich from her. Now suddenly, this kingdom that has been worshiping it is turning against it. And you see what happens. There have been many rifts with Netanyahu. Clinton was not a fan either, but none like we see today. But he always comes back, and he always tries to get control. He always tries to invade again and get what he can get. Just like he said, he knows what America is. He knows how to manipulate it. But at some point, the jig is going to be up, and it's already started, just by nature of people coming out and saying, no, this is not okay. This is a genocide. We don't want to pay for this. We don't want to support it. And we want to defend the innocent. And so this is going to happen just before that image of the Antichrist rises. Ships of the western coastlands will appoint him. He will lose heart. Then he will turn back and vent his fury against the Holy Covenant. He will return and show favor to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. And during all this time, he's rising to power. Now verse 31 is the rise of this image of the Antichrist. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. So there's your timestamp. And you need to know that that's happening in 4 months and a little under a week. That's when I will be done with my daily sacrifice. How do I know that? Because I know that as a witness, I have 1,260 days. Then the Antichrist will rise from the abyss to overpower and kill the witnesses, and he will go after God's people, and he will also go after the very people who are worshiping it. Let's go to Revelation 9. The first thing I want to show you is actually in Revelation 13. Verse 8. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. You go into one of two categories, because if you worship the beast and you receive its image, or you receive its mark, you are going into the lake of burning sulfur. You are the Antichrist. The other category is the kingdom of Christ, and these will be killed for not worshiping the beast. That's what Revelation 13 tells us. By very nature of that, you either have the seal or you have the mark of the beast, period. Those are the only two categories from that point on. Because we see in Revelation that from the point of the rise of the Antichrist, the fifth trumpet, no one returns to God. No one repents. We're also going to see different language in Revelation 9 from what was seen in Revelation 8 with regard to the first 4 trumpets, because what is happening is the seal was already placed before the first 4 trumpets blow. But now God is making it clear in his word that not only has it been established who has the seal, but it's been established who does not, and who is destined to get the mark of the beast. And because they've killed his prophets for the last time, God begins the woes. And this is the first woe. And that woe, you're going to see the language, that this woe comes on those who do not have the seal of God. Well, who doesn't have the seal of God but the Antichrist kingdom, who worship the image of the beast? So the irony here is that the image of the beast is actually rising and persecuting the very people who worship it. Divided kingdom. There's no loyalty here. It doesn't matter that you've laid yourself prostrate before counterfeit Israel, sent them your money and donations and all of these things. It doesn't matter. They don't care any more than the spirit inside them is loyal. The fifth angel sounded his trumpet. By the way, this is the reason why the witnesses, the two witnesses of God, which are the 144,000, are only sealed before the first four trumpets blow. In Ezekiel, the multitude in white robes received that seal, also identified as a mark, but it's clear that it's the seal of God, before the first six trumpets blow. And the reason why they receive it before the first six trumpets is because they're not going to be here after the seventh trumpet. That's when God's bowls of wrath are poured out. The mystery of God, the resurrection, occurs when the seventh trumpet is about to sound. The witnesses of God die when the Antichrist rises. So if you see the Antichrist rising at the fifth trumpet, then you know that the witnesses are dying at that time. And that's why they were sealed only for the first four trumpets. The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. A star is an angel, Satan is an angel. And Satan, as we're told in Revelation 12, has lost his place in the heavenly realms because of, 1, the blood of the Lamb, and 2, the testimony of the witnesses who did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So they know they're going to die. Just like I tell you over and over, I'm going to die, and he's going to go after you. So he's lost his place in the heavenly realms. This is a star that fell from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. Now, in Revelation 12, what does it say? The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. And it says in verse 12, therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He's filled with fury because he knows his time is short. When the dragon saw that he'd been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman being the church. So this is what you're seeing in Revelation 9. Him falling from the heavenly realms, losing his place in the heavenly realms. He's angry because he knows his time is short. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss, and out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. So he's in the abyss, and Revelation 11 says when he rises from the abyss, he's going to overpower and kill the witnesses. Okay, we have our timestamp. Why is it that I know these things, guys? Why is it that I'm able to explain them to you, but stupid people in counterfeit Christianity who claim to be serving God can't get this together? I'm either from God and doing what I say I'm doing, or I'm not. And no one can have anything unless God has given it. Why do I have this understanding? Because I'm doing what I say I'm doing. And in 4 months, you will know. But if you don't discern this now and you don't return to God, it won't matter in 4 months if you look at this and say, whoa, Carrie was right. It will have been too late. You will not be able to return to God. The word is true, and no one repents after the fifth trumpet. Something has already been established. Now listen. Out of the smoke came locusts down on the earth and were given power like that of scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. This is coming on the Antichrist kingdom first. Those who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And this is an army, by the way, not literal locusts. This is an army that has as king over them Abaddon in Hebrew, and in Greek Apollyon, that is destroyer. These are the Babylonians that Habakkuk was spoken to, that God was raising in order to execute judgment. This is Babylon, as is referred to in Revelation, throughout Revelation, that God has raised in order to execute judgment. These who, by the way, Their hair is like women's hair and their teeth are like lion's teeth. What are women's hair? What does women's hair signify in the Bible? Y'all don't know because a lot of you keep putting on head coverings even though you haven't been told to do that. Paul told you that a woman has hair as her covering. And so if these people have hair like women's hair, they're wearing coverings, even though the word has not told them to do that. And they have breastplates like breastplates of iron. God's people have breastplates of righteousness. This army has breastplates of iron. A foreign god that helps them, as is written in Daniel 11. A foreign god who helps them to attack. Iron, which has always represented Rome. And papal Rome is better known as Babylon the Great. Okay, so the false prophet of the United States is going to fall in power. It doesn't mean that they're not going to have power. Just like Babylon the Great fell, it doesn't mean that they didn't have power. It means that they were not the superpower. They have continued to have power. But even in Daniel 11, they don't rise to power, to being in power again. What they rise to is using their power in order to facilitate the attacks of the image of the Antichrist. That's how Babylon the Great will be seen. When the false prophet falls in power to the image of the Antichrist, it will continue to have power, but it will not be the global superpower that it was. But you can see in Revelation 13 that it will continue to have some element of power to the extent that it forces all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. So this kingdom is still working together. The image of the Antichrist, the false prophet, Babylon the Great, the prostitutes that bore out of her. I don't yet know what the role of Western Europe is going to be, and whether they will continue testifying to her all the way to the end. I am inclined to believe that they will. These are the things that God has been making clear to me. I want to make them clear to you. We have very little time for you to return. Very little time for you to return. This is the only thing that matters. And in fact, I shared with you on a video yesterday that God has made me sick for the last few days. And I had this terrible aching in my bones and in my muscles, similar to what we call the flu, and a relentless cough, which has made it very difficult for me to do these videos because I keep having to pause, but he's given me enough voice to be able to do this video at least and continue in what he requires of me. The reason he's made me sick is because I was getting into a place where unbelief was starting to come out of me, and I was starting to get scared. And it has to be purified out of us. We have to be in a place where we are pure gold, where he has purified, made spotless, and refined us. And that includes his witnesses. It includes his servants. All the more, my goodness. I mean, I have to be in such a lowly position to be able to do what I'm doing. And there's a man who keeps coming to my house and has told my neighbor across the street that he wants to buy my house. And I'm telling you, every day, if not every other day, if not every day, he comes to my house and knocks on my door. The last time was yesterday, and I don't answer the door. But it started to stir up some uneasiness in me, while concurrently reminding myself that God sends everything, and God has sent this man in order to purify something out of me. And so then I have to examine, what is this bringing up for me? What am I afraid of? Well, in part of this, I started to get angry, and I started to feel different kinds of things. And then God made me sick. And I know this may sound weird to some of you if it's the first time you're hearing it, but he's brought me to a place of such lowliness. I don't have any power in myself to do anything, period. But especially when you're sick, you don't have any power to even worry about these things. You submit yourself into God's hands all the more. And if you understand that he's the one that sent it, then you start examining yourself and realizing how detestable unbelief is. And that it is, as he's showing me the physical manifestation of unbelief, it creeps into your bones. It creeps into your innermost being. And this cannot be. What am I worried about? I have 4 months left here. What am I afraid of? I've done this for 3.5 years, almost. And by this, I mean my daily sacrifice. I've been doing this longer than that. What's another 4 months? God's had the ability to provide for me all this time that I've given up everything. What am I afraid of? Some lunatic who doesn't know how to buy a house the proper way? Or is too dull to go online and look and see that my house has already been auctioned? I don't need to be afraid. And I'm saying the same to you. If what I'm saying is true, then what we have left from the time the witnesses die are 1,335 days. Somewhere in that time, Jesus is going to return. We're told that in Daniel 12. And we're told that the wise will know, but the wicked will not understand. Is there anything else that matters here? Anything else? Are you going to prevent your children from having to go through the suffering that God has set them apart to go through? You're going to shield them from that? Well, let me tell you something. You can protect them, because the children of the wicked are going to go into far more suffering than the children of the righteous. So who do you fear? Do you fear those who can kill the body? Or do you fear the one who can kill both body and soul in hell? What is stopping you from hearing this message and responding? What is stopping you from discerning this with God? I know that what I'm saying is true. I know that what God called me to and raised me to is true. So something's wrong in you that you are not responding to this, that you are not assembling, that you are not obeying basic things like the Sabbath and how God says to observe His Sabbath. I've shown you in Scripture, I've shown you by my testimony and my lived testimony. I've proven to you in the world what is going on right now. Now go discern it with God. And if you discern it to be true, then you have to respond. And if you discern it not to be true, let me know the witnesses that God provided to you. I'd like to know. What witness? Because He provides 2 witnesses by His Spirit and His Word in His law. You show me where I'm wrong. You show me what God showed you. And you should expect to receive an answer from God either way, whether I'm correct or whether I'm false.